Hey, welcome to Script Tease, the Blood on the Clocktower Script Building Podcast. I'm your host, Kinky Joe. Minions! Everybody's favorite type of character to pull out of the bag. It's all of the fun of being evil, but without the responsibility of losing the game when you die. And from a script builder's perspective, the primary role of minions is to steer town away from their win condition. For example, in Trouble Brewing, the Baron removes helpful townsfolk, the Poisoner creates misinformation, the Spy generates suspicions on townsfolk, and the Scarlet Woman allows the Demon to play more chaotically. All these roles share the same goal, misdirecting the good team. So if all minions share the same goal of creating a more difficult game for good, why do we even need to worry about what minions we put on a script? Couldn't we just randomly pick 4 and call it good? Well, yes and no. While all minions have their purpose, if the players can just pinpoint what minions are in play, world building becomes much simpler. I'm going to show you a couple examples where this comes into play. Example 1 is there's 4 minions on a script, and it's the Vizier, the Fearmonger, the Psychopath, and the Baron. The Baron's the only outsider manipulation. A Vizier is announced, and a Psychopath successfully kills a player. It's a 12-player game. 3 players are claiming to be an outsider. Example 2. It's a 1-minion game. On the script is the Poisoner, the Witch, the Baron, Scarlet Woman. Witch kill occurs during day 1 nominations. Literally all the other 3 minions cannot be in play. The world where those minions exist is instantly snuffed out. Alright, we're going to dive into some concepts to help you determine how best to choose your minions for your script. The first concept that I want to get into, which I believe is the most important when you're script building, is loud versus quiet minions, which you just saw that I demonstrated in the previous 2 examples that I threw out there. What's a loud minion? Well, to simplify, loud minions are publicly detectable minions. Sometimes there's evidence of quiet minions, like people claiming to be an outsider in a 10-player game, but generally loud minions will announce their presence. Loud minions can further be broken down into announced minions and non-announced minions. Announced minions would be like the Vizier and the Fearmonger, which are publicly stated by the storyteller. Non-announced minions typically have the option to bury their ability with a few exceptions, like the Evil Twin. Quiet minions, they have no public confirmation. There may be evidence of them in play, but that evidence can usually be explained away as a player being evil, drunk, otherwise having bad information. While these minions are not directly announced to town, the storyteller usually has a lot of power as to what evidence there is of them. So how do we build scripts with loud minions? How do we make that work, right? Well, game size dictates how many minions are in play. Storyteller has more power than the script creator when it comes to keeping things hidden by choosing quiet minions over loud minions in smaller player count games, assuming that they're mixed together on a script. The players also have some agency here, like a Psychopath holding their kill until late game, or a Pit Hag only changing evil players, or only changing good players to roles like the Drunk or Marionette. But if you want to mix loud and quiet minions on a script as a script builder, and still allow for ambiguity, there's a couple of roles that actually allow this to happen. 2 of them right off the bat are Demons, Lil Monster and Lord of Typhon. Both of these add an additional minion ability to the game. That allows you on a script where there's potentially 1 loud minion total and all the other minions are quiet minions to keep that ambiguity out there. The Alchemist. The Alchemist is a way for a player to have a minion ability to be a good player, but it also allows an evil player to bluff that they're the Alchemist, keeping some ambiguity about the other minions in play. The Pit Hag. The Pit Hag can swap out other minion abilities to allow for different worlds to happen. This happens quite a bit on its base script SMV, where an Evil Twin would be swapped out for a Witch or a Serenovus quite often. The Hatter. The Hatter allows the evil team to change from whatever type of role that they are to another evil type of role, so minions can swap out for other minions, and demons can swap out for other demons, and potentially vice versa if using the Chaos Hatter. The Plague Doctor is very similar to the Hatter or the Pit Hag, where it allows another ability to come into play. The last one's one you're not allowed to do right now because we're just newbies. You can't do this. It's the Atheist. Yes, don't do that one. It's not good for you. Not at the moment. One day you'll be Zets. The next concept I want to go over is Infiltrator minions. So a minion that we consider an Infiltrator minion, it effectively helps the evil team create distrust in good roles through their ability to provide worlds where those roles might be evil. This can be as simple as a spy on a script with an Undertaker, to a script with a Golem and a boffin. The spy and the boffin in those examples are creating worlds where the good character's ability can be produced even if the player that did the ability is evil. The next concept I want to get into is evil survival. Evil survival are roles that allow the demon to stay alive longer, they keep the game going after the demon has died, or they allow the demon to move. We also have waking patterns. Now this is mainly important for the chambermaid, but us as script builders, we need to keep this in mind, especially if you just throw a chambermaid on your script. A waking pattern is pretty straightforward, but there are some complex waking patterns throughout the minions, and potentially the most complex waking patterns of all of the roles that exist in Clocktower. Things like the Godfather, wake up night one, and then sporadically throughout the game, depending on things that happen. There's some abilities that match up seamlessly, like the seamstress and the assassin, right? They both wake up until they use their ability. And then we have further weirder ones where it gets into like the marionette, where I can't tell you that it wakes up right now, right? It depends what ability the marionette got. So it's not something you just throw on your script and know for sure right then and there. It's a very unique situation. Now, those 4 concepts that we just discussed are far from the only concepts that matter when it comes to selecting a minion. And I've constructed an entire table to go over many concepts that allow us to kind of delineate the type of minion that we would want to select for a given script. It's a little overwhelming when you first see it. I'll try to be gentle. This table is designed to help a script builder filter out different parameters depending on the characteristics they're looking for in a minion on their script. This table is a living table. It's eventually going to have a sheet for the outsiders, the townsfolk, and the demons as well. Along the left-hand side are the minion names. Starting from the left and going right, we have quiet versus loud minions. We've got does it wake up or not, and how often. Does the minion have a Droisoning ability, poison or drunk? Can the minion cause death in any form or fashion? Does that minion have a win condition? Does the minion help the evil team survive, extend the game, move the demon around? Does the minion have a madness ability? Does the minion affect nominations and voting? And this encompasses a few different things. Does the minion have outsider modification? Is the minion allowing the evil team to infiltrate the good team, meaning it supports mechanical bluffing? There's a mechanical good role that this minion allows the team to create to distinguish in by being possibly bluffable by the evil team. So that minion's power. It's quite wordy. Some examples for each of the minions that are classified as an infiltrator. Interesting pairings for each minion, and then rougher pairings, ones that I would advise against in some circumstances or most circumstances for each minion. All right, starting with loud or quiet. I'm gonna go ahead and put just the quiet ones on here just so we can go through it. And I'm gonna also leave circumstantially quiet. Now, what does circumstantially quiet mean? Circumstantially quiet, for my purposes, is it depends on how the script was built, or the minion has the ability to turn off their ability while still having an ability. All right, I'll be very specific on that one. Let's go through these real quick. So many of these are going to seem familiar. All of the Trouble Brewing minions are on here. But the minions that kill or create an additional kill at night, those ones are really circumstantially quiet, meaning the Godfather and the Assassin. So those ones can be quiet because on BMR, there's other ways for kills to happen. It allows the Godfather and the Assassin to blend right in. It is just like a poisoner on TV. You're not sure if it's part of the reason for things happening. Off of BMR, they can be quite loud. It depends what else is on the script. If the only thing that creates extra deaths is a Godfather, and there's 2 deaths in the following night, that's insanely loud. You're also confirming that an outsider was executed the previous day. All right, the quiet minions that are on here, otherwise, they're all pretty straightforward. The ones that aren't on TB, we have our Boffin, which is brand new. That's our freshest minion that's been brought to the game. Very good for script builders, by the way. The Boom Dandy, and while the ability of the Boom Dandy is quite loud when it happens, very similar to the Goblin, it doesn't do anything that presents itself out there mechanically until that happens. Now, the Devil's Advocate is similar to the Assassin and the Godfather, where it is loud as hell if there's no pacifist, no tea lady, no sailor on script. If none of those are on script, then the Devil's Advocate is just on the script and everybody knows it. The Evil Twin is circumstantially quiet because it could be a bluff by the evil team. There is a good player that absolutely knows there's an Evil Twin in play when it happens, but it's not super publicly announced. I would still say it's probably loud, but it's similar to a Widow where the Widow ping only goes to one player, and it's not something that Town can have any mechanical evidence over unless the game ends, right? The Goblin. So the Goblin's another one that has to claim publicly, right? So you would think that means public minion. Why is the Goblin quiet when you have to publicly claim it to be it? Well, first off, what confirmation is there that you are the Goblin? Nothing, right? There's no mechanical thing that you're putting out into the game that actually says, yes, this player is the Goblin. Can anybody claim Goblin? Yeah, I'm gonna claim it right now. I'm the Goblin. Don't execute me, don't do it. As opposed to something like the Cerenovus. If the Cerenovus wants to use their ability, they for sure can use it on themselves and bury it, and we'll have that discussion in a minute. But if they want to choose another player knows mechanically for a fact that they are now Ceromad, and they have to deal with that, and there's some consequences that are very public if they're broken and the storyteller executes them. That's why it's different. The Goblin is a role that can be claimed, but just because it's on script doesn't mean it's in play. Literally anybody can claim it, and a big thing that happens is a demon claiming it, potentially just to save themselves for an extra day or to pretend that they are actually the Goblin. All right, going all the way down to the Summoner is the next one that's probably of interest here. The Summoner is listed as a quiet minion because it itself has no mechanical impact on the game that can be seen. The one thing that is mechanically evident is on the night 2 when no death happens. Okay? However, much like the Godfather Assassin, but in reverse, that can be faked. The evil team can sink a kill into a dead body and fake that actually happened. Finally, the Widow. The Widow we have listed as circumstantially quiet. The main reason behind the Widow being circumstantially quiet is because they can poison themselves. So they would see the Grem, poison themselves, no Widow call goes out. And there's this weird gray area where the Widow ping goes out to a player and they never actually say it. That is more of a storyteller side, so we're just going to leave it where it's at with circumstantially quiet. All right, what about those loud minions? I only listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 loud minions, and we saw the circumstantially ones. We could throw those on here too. Why not? Circumstantially quiet, just to go through. Although, again, they're not all gonna fall in line, so we'll leave it here for a moment. So the Cerenovus, we already kind of went over the example of that. Very loud, on a script with all loud minions. You know, sans the evil twin, which again is probably more on the loud side. The Fearmonger is our first loud minion that actually has another tag on it called announced. It's an announced public minion. There's no way to hide this. If a Fearmonger is in play, it is announced. There's ways for it to be delayed, a la the Goon, or potentially it comes into play later, or a Poisoner poisons the Fearmonger for the first night. But a Fearmonger, while it's active, while it has an ability, Talon is going to know this. The Harpy. The Harpy is a lot like the Cerenovus, where it chooses players, the other players have the impact of it. They know that it's in play. The Organ Grinder. The Organ Grinder can actually hide itself now, but to do its ability, it has to be loud. Everybody's got to know about it. So I'm not going to put that as circumstantially quiet because it doing its ability requires it to be loud. The Pit Hag. The Pit Hag can sink into the evil team as often as they'd like to, but to actually change good players into things, they have to be loud. It's an outed, loud role where other players are going to know that it's happening. The Psychopath. You can hide as a Psychopath for quite a while, but once you swipe at somebody, Town's going to know when it's successful. Also, if you ever get executed, that Rochambeau is pretty damn loud. All right, the Vizier, our second of 2 announced public loud minions. Yeah, the storyteller literally tells everybody, this is the Vizier, they're right here. If this is a 1 minion game, you can stop looking for that Poisoner. It's not in play, it's just a Vizier. Then we have our Witch. Our Witch, very straightforward. Again, it's another one that's on S&B with loud minions. The Witch, when it actually activates and goes off, a player dies, and Town sees it. And it's hard to bluff. There are roles that can make it blend in a little more, but it's pretty damn loud. All right, for the remainder of this table, I'm going to kind of bounce around where I think things are useful to talk about, but my plan is to distribute this so you guys can get a copy of this and use it for your own needs, filtering just as we did for the louder quiet minions. For the Wakes pattern, I just want to talk through a couple of interesting things that are going on here. I mentioned that previously that this is for mainly the Chambermaid, right? The Chambermaid has a lot of impacts, and I do like building around the Chambermaid. It's getting harder and harder if we were to look at how many minions don't wake at all, let's do that real quick. So let's clear them all. And then we're just going to go down and look at no waking. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 current minions that do not wake at all. Then there's a bunch that wake up irregularly. So let's throw those on there. The Marionette and the Summoner. The Summoner wakes first night, then they might wake the second night if there is a Pucka script. Then they wake the third night to do the thing, and then they're done. There's also the Marionette that depends which role they actually received from the good team before they got the Marionette tag on them for us to even know what their waking pattern is. So you can't build around that being a thing. Then we have our irregular each nights and our regular onces. That brings in the Assassin, that brings in the Godfather, where it's very irregular and it can stop at some point. The Assassin triggers once, then they stop waking, but it starts on the second night. The Godfather actually wakes up the first night no matter what, but then ongoing throughout the game, it just depends if a outsider was executed. Then we have our onces, which I want to get into real quick. This is just on the first night that this role exists. The Boffin, they wake up, they're going to learn the ability that the demon gained due to their ability. The Evil Twin is going to wake up with their twin and learn who the other player is. The Mazephyli is going to learn that evil word, and the Widow is going to wake up to poison a player. So yeah, if you have a chambermaid on script, it's important to look at the waking patterns and make sure that you can have the minions match up with some of the demons, but also have roles that match townsfolk. We need roles that have a good mix. If everybody wakes on the entire script, chambermaid is useless, not doing anything, just take it off the script. Let's look at our next column, which is Droisoning. Now, the Droisoning, there's actually only a couple of minions on here that do any impact to townsfolk via Droison. And that's really the Poisoner and the Widow. With the addition of the Boffin, we have the ability to now distribute the Drunk to town, if that's what's given to the demon. For the Marionette, it doesn't actually Droison town. It really doesn't Droison anything, but it's similar to the Drunk, where the evil player, whoever gets the Marionette tag attached to them as the minion, now has a non-functioning ability. And that does a lot for town. That's why I didn't put it as a yes or a no. It's a unique. It's not really Droison, but it's Droison adjacent. And then we have our newest addition to the Droison gang here, the Organ Grinder. The Organ Grinder had a recent update that made it way more fun for my crew here over at Kinky Clocktower. And it allows itself to get a little schweister, just like your old buddy here. And I think that it's done good things for it. But even with that, there's only 5 total minions here that have any impact with Droison. All right, the next column is, can the minion cause death and then win? So I've marked up in this column the ones that can only cause death during the night, if they can cause death during the night or day, if only the day. And then I have some ones that are on here that are unique that I want to go through really quickly and what the unique means. I think it's important to kind of define that. So for the Boffin, it's unique, and it's going to have a lot of unique tags because it's just kind of the nature of the Boffin where it can have a good ability. The Boffin can kill if it has the Golem ability, right? If the demon has that. If the demon's got the Gossip ability, the Lycanthrope ability. Those are all things that allow the Boffin to create deaths on script. The Boom Dandy. The Boom Dandy has multiple kills if they ever trigger, right? So it's unique. It's not really an effect on the game in a way like an Assassin or a Godfather would be. It's at the end of the day type thing, but it can result in killing and not ending the game. In a world where there's roles that survive, or in the weirdest world where the good team points at a dead player as the majority and no one dies. Those are all interesting circumstances that are probably not going to happen very often, but the Boom Dandy at least can be something that has that. So I left it in there as a unique. Then we move down to the Pit Hag. The Pit Hag has this unique modifier because the Pit Hag actually doesn't try to kill. That's not in its ability at all. The Pit Hag's ability is turn a player into another role. The thing is, if they ever create a demon, it gives the storyteller carte blanche to do anything they want with deaths. They do have guidance under that, but it does allow them to kill upwards of the rest of the players in the game, or down to 0. And that could be something that helps the evil team. It could be something that helps the good team. It exists on a very popular script called Catfishing. It exists on there because it also helps bluff Gossip. It helps hide a Godfather, among other things. It's important to note that it is not a substitute for an assassin or a godfather in that world when you're script building, but it does create kills, and it's something that the evil team and the good team should all be aware of. Then you get your Vizier as the last unique one here, and that one's unique because the Vizier itself doesn't actually kill per se, but through the nomination process, they decide who would be executed when their ability goes off, which does create a kill. All right, our next column is win conditions. For our win conditions, the only unique one I have on here is the Boffin, and that's because the Boffin can give the demon a townsfolk or an outsider win condition. Could be a loss condition, right? If you give the demon the Saint ability or something similar. But the Boffin giving the demon a mayor or a cult leader or a amnesiac ability that can win the game. All the other roles on here are pretty straightforward. Win condition type roles. The one that I did put on here that is kind of more unique is the Boom Dandy, but I'm leaving it as a yes because the majority of games that happen with the Boom Dandy, that is the final thing that happens, is the Boom Dandy goes off, town votes, game ends. Especially with the new 10 count timer, just to be clear. The other ones are all ones that we're all aware of, where we got Evil Twin, Fearmonger, Goblin, and our Mastermind. Evil Survival. Evil Survival is extending the game, it gives demon movement, it protects the demon from death. And I want to go through a lot of these just to discuss and make sure it's clear what I mean by these. So the Boffin, as mentioned, can give you a townsfolk ability. That could give you the engineer ability, allowing you to engineer yourself into a legion or something like that. The Devil's Advocate helps the demon not die. Could give them that one last chance, that extra night to star pass if it's an imp or something similar like a Fangu. The Evil Twin, if the demon gets executed, the game continues. It gives a chance, even on its base script, S&V, the Pit Hag, after the demon dies, can create a new demon with a living Evil Twin. It allows the game to keep going, which is great for the Evil Twin. All right, the Goblin. The Goblin is very similar to the Devil's Advocate, but not similar at all when it comes mechanically. So if the demon is executed, they still lose with the Goblin. The difference here is that the demon can claim Goblin, giving town pause on whether or not they should vote on this. Unlike the Devil's Advocate, where there's no risk to voting on it and going for the kill, this one could potentially end in town losing. So it's a little bit spicier. I like to slide it here under Evil Survival because it does give a chance for the evil team to continue playing, which could be that one chance that they need. The Mastermind, classic on BMR. If the demon is executed and the good team executes a good player the next day, they lose. So this gives the good team pause when they go for that kill, depending on who they executed the previous day. The Pit Hag. Pit Hag has the ability to move the demon somewhere else, just as discussed in our Evil Twin example. I think that one's pretty straightforward, and so is the Scarlet Woman. Those two just kind of make sense. The Summoner is the cheeky one on this list because the Summoner itself does not keep the game going if they die. What the Summoner allows for is moving the demon around. So the Summoner on day 2, after they've been nominated, can basically out as Summoner and do whatever the hell they want and then just summon somebody. That is, in my opinion, in line with something like a Pit Hag or a Goblin type situation. It only lasts for the first couple days, mainly day 2, but it does allow the evil team to continue, and it hides the demon somewhere in town. All right, Madness. There's not a lot of Madness roles that exist on the evil team at the moment. The two main ones are the Serenovus and the Harpy, but the Boffin does have the ability to have Madness roles in there, things like the Pixie or the Mutant. All right, affecting nominations and voting. So I have a couple on here that are very, very straightforward and easy to understand. Some that you've seen on the WinCon. In fact, every WinCon that has a yes is also a yes on this one as well. What's added here are ones that have to do with manipulation of voting, who's being nominated, things like that. Let's go through a few examples here. All right, the Boffin. The Boffin can do some unique stuff. I guess an easy example is if the demon has the Recluse ability, they could register as a minion and give a town crier a yes, thus putting them in a weird spot where the good team thinks they're just a minion. It's kind of a funky example, and I'm sure there's a bunch more others that are not that silly. The Serenovus, the reason that one has a unique unique tag on here is because the Serenovus can end the day, thus removing nominations, removing voting, right? could even just fry the flower girl if they wanted to get voting happen, and this happens. The Devil's Advocate, the Evil Twin, the Fearmonger, the Goblin, those are all straightforward. Then we get to the Harpy, which is similar to the Cerenovus, where it impacts who you need to nominate or vote on, because in your world, if you're mad as the Harpy, you should be voting on those players, unless you can come up with a world why. You might even have to nominate them, depending on how mad that you're being that day, to satisfy the madness. Kind of adjacent to affecting nominations and voting, but that's why it's got that unique tag on there. The Organ Grinder, one of the biggest, meanest baddies for the voting process, because nobody gets to see who votes when they are active. Spy, and the reason the Spy is on here is actually similar to why the Boffin is on here. It affects the fact that it can register as not a minion, right? So it can register as a good or an evil player, which does impact a few different things, but if we just use the Town Crier example, the Spy is impacting that character specifically. It's kind of a weaker one compared to the other ones. The Vizier is similar to the Organ Grinder, where it can push along or affect the way the town votes that day very, very loudly. And then finally, the Witch. The Witch, when people nominate and die, that's going to give them pause to even nominate. Outsider Modification. So there's only 2 minions that really modify the Outsider count. Rules is written right now, and that's the Baron and the Godfather. The other ones that I have on this list are not so straightforward. We have our Boffin and our Marionette, and they actually have the same overlap on how they impact the Outsider count. The way that the Outsider count gets modified by these 2 lucky fellows is if they have the ability of the Balloonist or the Huntsman, and potentially the Amnesiac or other roles that are coming in the future. So if they give those abilities to the Marionette has a jinx that requires those roles be added or could be added for the Balloonist example. And then the Boffin always just gives the entire ability to the Demon. So it's a way to impact the Outsider count. All right, Infiltrator minions. So just to re-explain this real quick, Infiltrator minions help support bluffing mechanical roles, okay? So any of these ones, I'm going to go through and try to give an example for all the ones that have a yes on them. The Assassin allows you to bluff roles similar to BMR, the Gossip, the Gambler, and then the newer one that got added is the Townsfolk version of the Acrobat. And that's going to apply to the Godfather as well, with an actual couple of added benefits. The Boffin lets you basically copy or act like you can be any townsfolk. There's some nuance to that. If you can't have the Heretic ability, first off, and there's a couple of other abilities that you strictly shouldn't have. If you are a demon without a Scarlet Woman, bluffing that you have the Gambler ability is going to be quite difficult. The Cerenovus allows you to replicate either procking a Virgin, as in you could do this if your demon has a Virgin bluff, and then the Cerenovus breaks Madness on the demon or some other combination of that to sell that bluff. You could have a Mutant on script, and the Cerenovus and the Mutant are on the same base script. This is a pretty popular common play where the Cerenovus pretends they're the Mutant, breaks Madness, and screws with the Outsider count. Then we have our Devil's Advocate, which plays really well with all of the BMR roles, any ones that survive execution, and it allows you to kind of fake that you are those. Specifically, the Tea-Lady is a really fun and popular one by the DA. Then we have our Godfather that allows you to bluff outsiders. This is the only minion that has negative outsider mod. I'll put an asterisk on that because I actually want to jump back to the Marionette in a second. Because the Godfather can -1 outsiders, loud outsiders, publicly claimed outsiders, which is almost all of them except for the Goon potentially on BMR, can claim face up and still have sus on them because the Godfather allows that -1 to exist. They can also bluff things that the Assassin can, but with less reliability. Remember, the Assassin gets to choose when it kills, so I pair the Godfather less with the Gossip in that world, and it's harder to bluff, but it is possible. Speaking of, the Harpy can do similar to the Godfather or the Assassin, and it's with the discretion of the storyteller. You'll probably have to choose wisely, and then you'll probably have to take the lumps that are involved in making your deal with the devil there. So if you want to be the Harpy and you want to bluff that you are the Golem, you choose yourself and a player, you break Madness. If you're good with the storyteller, you can get that player killed. Bam, you've bluffed that roll. You can bluff Gossip too. It kills players at night, right? That's a possibility with the storyteller. It's not something that you can guarantee will happen, but if you're willing to break Madness, your storyteller is more likely and willing to kill you if you want to do it than another player just to sell your bluff. However, I do believe most storytellers want to help the evil team as much as possible, and if it's a lower level role, or if you're willing to die with it, I think that they'll be satisfied in killing both of you. Alright, the Marionette allows you to infiltrate any of the information roles, less so mechanical ones. So the Marionette on a script where there's no Spy, no Boffin, no Widow, and there's an Undertaker, it's the only way the evil team can bluff Undertaker, is with the Marionette. Obviously the evil team can get lucky and guess, but it is one of the ways in there that keeps things a little cheeky. Marionette was used a lot before Boffin existed as a kind of non-spy, non-widow, basically a non-Grim Peaker way to do information roles that the evil team wouldn't have. Confirmation roles. Because most of the time, evil knows all of the evil players in game, but they don't know all of the good roles in game. They don't know who's what. That's why bluffing roles like Oracle and VI and Fortune Teller are mundane. That doesn't take any skill for the evil team to do. They just pick a couple players and do it. There's some nuance in there, right? If there's like a Recluse in play, but that's the idea. Is I can't guess that you're the Raven Keeper. I have to figure that out. And the Marionette with a role like the Washerwoman would learn something like that. So it's very useful. The Mezephiles. All right, Mezephiles is the only minion that can make a good player become evil. This does mean when the Mez is on script, any good player could become an evil player. Golems that have struck are no longer just well trusted. The Virgin that got an execution, they might get turned after that happens. One thing to note, that a Mezephiles turning a good player into an evil player does not mean that they're now a minion, and it does not mean that they're now the demon, which means they're still not a win condition. All right, the Organ Grinder. The Organ Grinder can bluff Preacher or Minstrel by turning off its ability. The Pit Hag, because it acts on night 2 and not night 1, it could turn any of the evil roles into a role and pretend that they're that for the following nights. Something like a Philosopher is pretty popular to do. A Pit Hag might turn themselves into a Philo, and then Philo into something interesting to create more misinformation in the game. The Poisoner. Poisoner can do a couple of different bluffs out there, like a Preacher bluff, potentially if they want to do a Preacher on an Alchemist claim and then go for it. They can also pretend that they're a Droison type townsfolk, like a Sailor or an Innkeeper. The Scarlet Woman. Scarlet Woman allows night rolls to happen for the demon if they'd like to kill themselves and pass it on. It also allows a Recluse bluff for the demon if a Slayer is on script and they get shot. Because then that would be more of a viable thing. If there's a Recluse on script and there is no Scarlet Woman and a Slayer kills them, well, the game ends, so. Or if they're the Recluse, then they are just literally the Recluse and the game continues, right? The Spy. The Spy is our first Grim Peaker. The Spy can basically bluff as any confirmation role. Because they're like, hey, I see you as this. You're this, right? And you're like, yeah, that's me. So very powerful, but their ability to also proc as a good player means that other roles have to be suspicious about who they see. And it's the only minion that can proc the Virgin. All right, then we get to our Summoner. The Summoner I did not put on here as an Infiltrator minion, so to speak, but I did put this unique tag on here because what it does is anybody who you did trust on day 1, day 2, well, on day 3, all that trust is reset, because if a Summoner is in play or on the script and it's potentially in play, anybody who was mechanically confirmed prior to day 3, that's out the window. Then we get into our Widow. Our Widow is a lot like the Spy, but it loses out on that aligning as a townsfolk situation and registering as that in the gain of having a Droison ability that they can just select as their juiciest target. All right, our last couple of columns here. I wanted to talk about, because this is a script building podcast and we're trying to build good, fun scripts here, I threw in a couple of examples for each of the minions on where they really line up well. Meaning if these two roles are on script together, there's good synergy there. There's something interesting that will happen. And I'm going to walk through all of the examples on this and then kind of go through at the same time things that I don't think pair well. This is not an all-inclusive list. These are just examples to kind of get you going. I want you guys to be thinking about things that don't work as well. Noting all of the other columns play into these two columns here, the interesting pairings and the rough pairings. So the Assassin. The Assassin I have marked up, and these are things that I'm telling you over and over again are good, is the Gossip and the Assassin. It's just good. It just works. However, the Lycanthrope is another interesting one with the Assassin. The Lycanthrope and the Assassin, they kind of play off each other. It was stronger before the Lycanthrope, got changed recently. But now, at least, the assassin can kind of go hunting for the lycanthrope and try to find them when the demon is unable to do anything with the killing. And the innkeeper. The innkeeper protecting 2 players and the demon having a rough time. The assassin being able to penetrate through that is very, very sexy. We love that. Okay, it confuses the innkeeper, and when the innkeeper is thinking that they might be Droison or something, this leaves one world open for them to have. Now, I put on here some rough pairings. And again, not all inclusive, but I really hate the king and the assassin. First off, the evil team knows exactly who the king is. The penalty to killing the king for the demon is if there's a choir boy in play, they learn who the demon is. So with one click of my button, so to speak, of the assassin, I remove the king and the choir boy's ability and all threat to the demon killing the wrong player here. That sucks. That's not fun. So yeah, I don't like that. And that's going to come up a few times on here. Also, the Leviathan. The Leviathan is a demon that wants as many options for demon candidates alive at the end of the game. The assassin could pair well with it. I just don't think it's great to have killing minions for the most part with the Leviathan. I probably won't have Leviathan in every spot where there's killing minions, but for the most part, it's not good. It's not great. All right, the Baron. The Baron and the Drunk are best friends. I don't know if you guys know this, but on one of the older versions of TB, the Baron specifically only added the Drunk into play. You can see how well they pair because the Baron without a Drunk means that there's always an additional 2 outsiders that everybody should be looking for. And the Baron with a Drunk on script means if somebody's claiming another role, it could be possible. It also leaves room for one more claim of outsider because there's a Drunk floating around out there and may or may not be in play. It's beautiful. The Baron and the Drunk, they should get married. I am an ordained minister. I'll make it happen. Let's go. Let's get these 2 together. I think it should happen. All right, then we have our not good pairings. And the main reason for these is because it's an auto option for the engineer. The engineer is always just going to throw a Baron in play if they're on script. The Baron doesn't do anything. They've already done their thing during setup. I also have marked down here the Khazali and the Lord of Typhon. Those are kind of self-explanatory, but for those not familiar, those 2 demons have their own outsider modification. The Baron does nothing with them. And the Khazali should rarely, they just shouldn't pick the Baron that's not getting anything for their team. So yeah, bad combo. Don't do it. The Boffin. Now this Boffin interesting pairings could go on forever. I'm going to throw in some of the highlights on here that I like that I think are interesting. The Amnesiac's a fun one because it allows the demon to have a cool power that the storyteller came up with, something fun, interesting, and fair to their team that's going to bring something unique to that game, and I love that. I think that's so fun and something only the Boffin could provide to the game from night 1. The Golem, because the Golem is such a hard confirmed outsider, having a Boffin on script with a Golem really does help a lot. You don't know for sure, and it gives you pause on whether you should leave that Golem alive because it could just be the freaking demon. The Drunk. So the Boffin and the Drunk have a unique ability. It's this jinx where the evil team gets to choose a good player to have the Drunk's ability instead of the demon. And I think that's awesome. That's so cool. It's almost like a permanent poison while that player, the Boffin and the demon are comboed together. Then we have our Imp. Why is the Imp so good with the Boffin? I just love the ability that it can kill itself and give a new Boffin ability to the next player in the line. Now I have Spy and Widow on here as rough pairings with the Boffin. And I'm going to take a second to explain this. The reason that they're rough together, because the Spy and the Widow could see the Grim, and if it's mostly informational roles in the game, a la Undertaker or Dreamer type things, the Spy and the Widow do that by themselves, and they can do way more. They give all of the options to the demon. It's a, like, if that is it, if it's an S&V type script and you have a Boffin on there, it's not doing anything. It just isn't. Because the Spy and the Widow already did all the work. However, if you want the script to have no Grim Peekers, which I'm a fan of, I like the fact that evil team doesn't know what's going on, the Boffin gives you a softer version of that, which I find compelling in script building. I think that's interesting. So in a world where you wanted to put a Spy or a Widow on there just to have the ability to bluff certain roles, the Boffin does it more interestingly, okay? Something to keep in mind. They all work, but putting them all in the same script really neuters the Boffin's role. It just does. All right, Boom Dandy. The Boom Dandy's interesting pairings are basically night 1 roles, roles that want to die, damsels, stuff like that, because they're also trying to just get out of there day 1. They want to make this happen. Now, Boom Dandy with Leviathan, I did mark it specifically here because it sucks. If you have a Boom Dandy and a Leviathan, I'm going to cheat code for you guys. Let's say it's day 2 and they found out who the Boom Dandy is. And town executes the Boom Dandy. All they have to do is point at a dead body. Guess what? The Leviathan can't kill. Guess what? It's 3 players left in the game for the next 3 days. It's fucking terrible. So yeah, don't do that. It's not good. All right, for the Cerenovus, I put a lot of interesting ones on here, but it's a lot of things that don't want to claim, like the Snake Charmer. The Mutant is obviously a great pair with it. The Damsel, the Pixie, just because they're claiming other roles and it's something else with Madness that is role-based Madness, not Harpy Madness. You'll notice Harpy's not on here. I don't think Harpy and Cerenovus necessarily synergize. It's fine to have them on a script together, but not because they are on a script together. And then the Leviathan. So this is the first instance of a Leviathan being on the interesting pairings because of the ability to make a player break Madness, thus causing maybe one of the only good executions to happen pretty early in a game. It's pretty strong. Devil's Advocate we kind of covered when we were talking about the examples that they can copy, but for the rough pairings, I see this a lot. I see Leech and Devil's Advocate on scripts together, and then I'll see Leech, Devil's Advocate, Scarlet Woman, Pit Hag, and I just want to rip my fucking hair out. It's so rough. If I go to execute a player and they survive execution, and then I have to do that every day for a Leech host, and I don't know if, I don't know. Maybe it's not the worst thing in the world, but I'll tell you, my player group gets very frustrated by that, and I don't know how it's not more frustrating for other people to have this, like, no executions ever go off situation. Where you find, I guess if you found the Leech, but then it kind of removes all reasons for not double tapping. Like, you always have to double tap. But hey, as I mentioned, a lot of people like it. And if this is something that your group is okay with, then you know what? I could be convinced. I'm gonna add the word sometimes in there, because my group hates it. Then we get to our Evil Twin. So Evil Twin has interesting pairings, right? Alignment checkers on scripts is obviously useful with Evil Twin. I think it's good. Also, roles that the evil team can bluff very easily, like Oracle, like Fortune Teller. You want those on a script with Evil Twin, because if you're giving Dreamer as the twin to the Evil Twin, it's pretty hard. that's like super hard to bluff. On the other side of that, and this is definitely not all-encompassing, a couple of roles that work poorly with the Evil Twin are the Lycanthrope, and because the Lycanthrope can literally just kill the good twin, nullifying the entire ability. And I have the Clockmaker on here, which, yes, Clockmaker is on the base script with the Evil Twin, and I still think it sucks. I think just knowing where a evil player is and having the Clockmaker ping off that is rough. It works on S&V, sort of, only because there's things like Vortox, but man, even that script, you have to do specific setups for it to work, and half the time they're going to make the Evil Twins the Clockmaker pair. It's just not a good thing, in my opinion. Fearmonger. So I think the Fearmonger pairs very well with roles that have alignment checking or ways that you think somebody's evil or not. It even pairs well with like the Harpy, honestly, because the Fearmonger is trying to get people on board with voting on the target that they would like to kill. So having those roles on script gives you a viable reason why people should want to kill your target. It also gives the opposite reason to players who are actually those roles. So Fortune Teller trying to kill somebody, it's like, man, is this just the Fearmonger trying to get his stuff? And it has good synergy that way. All right, the Goblin. I have Alchemist on here. This is the first of a few that have just good synergy with the Alchemist. It's because Alchemist Goblin is just great. It gives a role that people typically claim to stay alive, a reason to talk town and convince them into getting you executed because you're good. And it's potentially a way to stay alive for a while too. It's great in a, actually I want to add it here, I don't have it, but Poppy Grower, even though I'm running out of room on this page, we'll put it in there. But I'll change to Alk, that way we get room for it. So Alk, Poppy Grower, those work very well together. The Snake Charmer, the Politician, Cerenovus, those, the Snake Charmer and the Politician, that goes with a couple of other roles too, where they're just being cheeky. It keeps them alive. It lets them keep doing their bullshit while they're claiming those roles. And the Cerenovus has a really, really fun jinx with the Goblin that allows you to make other people mad as the Goblin. It's the only evil role that can be made mad as evil role. The Poppy Grower is great because claiming Goblin, either the Poppy Grower could be doing it, an evil player, and it's a good way to like out evil to try to have people come up and chat with you. And it's completely optional. You could just be lying, and it gets into really fun back and forth with that. Now, I put on here Rough Pairings, the Vizier, but awkwardly, I have a really good script, good quotes, that has the Vizier and the Goblin. It's called Al Had Me at Hello. It's also got the King, Choir. There's a lot of spicy stuff on there, but it is specifically built around this. It also has an Alchemist in there. So I find it spicy, maybe a little too spicy for a lot of people, but it exists. It's something you can do, and I think if you are okay with the level of spice that generates, play that script, try it out, see if you like it, and then go on and do your own thing with it. Godfather. So the fact that the Godfather removes an outsider is great, right? But the pairings with it, when you're thinking about what goes good with a Godfather, really it's outsiders that want to die, right? Because then you get double the dosage, or things that are suspicious outsiders like Damsel, right? And things like that. It really does help. So I have on here Barber, Plague, Mutant, a lot of them. Anything that's acting suspicious but doesn't want to out that they're actually an outsider. Those things, when they get murdered, it's delicious because they're suspicious enough to get executed. The Godfather gets a chance to add a little kill to their resume there. Now, this is similar to the Baron, where it's not very good on Lord of Typhon or Khazali scripts. It's a little better because its only ability is not adding outsiders like the Baron. In this one, the ability actually allows you to get a kill and learn the outsiders in play. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it is less useful. And I wrote King in here because this one could kill the King similar to the Assassin. All right, the Harpy. So the combos of the Harpy are very similar to the Fearmonger and to the synergies when I was talking about the Infiltrator earlier with Gollum. But similar to the other scripts, other minions that kill, the Leviathan is not great with the Harpy. If I'm a good roll and I don't want to be a demon candidate anymore, I could break Madness and the storyteller should kill me, right? Probably. And if they do kill me, guess what? I'm no longer a target, and I also did not get executed by town. That's not good for the evil team. All right, Marionette. So the Marionette has some fun synergy with Lunatic because it's another way that you can convince the Lunatic that they are the Lunatic by giving them a minion that doesn't know that they're a minion. The Ogre, because the Ogre doesn't know their own alignment when they pick the Marionette, so both don't know their alignment. And the Recluse, because you can kind of go right next to the Recluse, gives you another setup option that isn't just the demon. On the other side of it, the Rough Pairings, if you already have a drunk on script, then Pit Hag is a little rough. Because you just have a quiet-ass Pit Hag in that world where the Pit Hag's making drunks and marionettes for the first 3 days, and then they can do whatever else internally. Also, the Engineer is terrible with the Marionette because it's a go-to play. I mean, night one, the Engineer makes a Marionette. All you did was just remove a minion from play with no real... I mean, it's just optimal. It's not fun. So yeah, don't do it. Mastermind is the BMR straight up. I kind of left it here. There's a synergy with like Heretic that's interesting, but honestly, not a lot going on outside of BMR for it, and that's why you don't see it on a lot of scripts. Mezephiles is good with almost all roles, as long as there's no other added evil roles on the game. So things like Fangu, Bounty Hunter, not great. Cult Leader. I've seen there's a script by Milk called Trust that has a politician. That can work. It's a bit spicy, but yeah, I mean, anything that adds extra evils, the Mezephiles is not going to work super well with. Organ Grinder kind of echoes the Infiltrator examples. I would say that the Organ Grinder is pretty rough with Vortox. I'm going to add the caveat sometimes here as well because I think it's not broken. It used to be way, way stronger when it was unable to ever kill the Organ Grinder, but I feel like the Organ Grinder plays a little more timid now that they can't just be immortal. And because they can potentially shut off their ability, it's possible that the Vortox isn't having as strong as of an effect. So I'm going to put sometimes here. It's strong, and that should go for things like Saint and whatnot as well. But the Vortox, it's not because you're executing somebody that doesn't want to be executed. It's because you don't know if you tied or not. And if you don't know if you tied or not, that's fucked. You just lose by accident. The Pit Hag. So the Pit Hag is really, really good as a minion just in general. But specifically, it's really good with like Fangu and Quiet Outsiders and things like Snake Charmer. And it's good for those because it allows the evil team to have options, right? And keep the Pit Hag under wraps potentially. If you make a person into the mutant and they out that they were changed, they better have a good reason into what they were changed into, or they're just outing that they're the mutant, right? The storyteller might execute them. Now, it has some rough combinations. It's another one where it does not work well with the king. The evil team knows who the king is. They could just pit hag them out of the king. And you could cycle assassins, which is not the most fun thing for the good team, where every other night you're making an assassin, they get their ability back, and then they kill. But hey, it can work on some scripts. So Poisoner is pretty good with roles that have strong townsfolk, and it's really good on most scripts, but the one script where you're going to hesitate to actually put it in is a Vortox script. Like, Vortox should be carrying the load on most scripts. I don't think Poisoner and Vortox work on the same script most of the time. We haven't gotten to that level of detail, but we'll get there soon on why. But yeah, for the most part, those two just aren't synergetic. The Psychopath. There's a new jinx that allows the Psychopath to bluff as the Golem, and it is not released yet. But the jinx does mean that these two are simpatico with each other for some awkward reason. I'll just throw it on here for now. And the reason it's not good with, so I have Preacher on here, by the way, and I put sometimes because it can be pretty spicy. If the Psychopath outs, the Preacher knows who to pick. That's pretty good, but also the Psychopath should know that there's a Preacher on script and be a little more careful about outing day one. So it really depends on your thoughts or philosophy on how you think outed minions should be treated. There's a very soft philosophy, we'll say, a softer on like, hey, you shouldn't just punish a evil player for using their ability. That's a fair way to look at it, right? If an ability is given to you, you should just have the ability to use it. On the other side, Preacher. I mean, that's their whole gimmick, right? So I think it's fun, I think it's interesting, but it's more of an experienced script setup if you have those on the same one. The King is bad. Psychopath just kills the King. It ends the whole ability. Scarlet Woman. Scarlet Woman's great because of the Recluse Slayer situation that we talked about, but it's also good for like night rolls and stuff. It's terrible with the Zomboul. It's terrible with the Leviathan. Please don't. Like, Jesus. There's probably other roles that it's bad with, but those are the two that stood out the most to me. The Spy. The Spy is, and I'm going to bring the Spy and the Widow together here. They're both really, really good with any Undertaker, Washerwoman stuff. I think that you should just have them on there because it means that none of them are confirmed. Specifically with the Spy, the Virgin is also useful on those scripts, but with Virgin might be better with like a Boffin thing at this point. On the other hand, I do believe now with the changes to the Damsel and the Widow and the Spy situation, that Jinx, I don't think the Damsel's actually that fun anymore. I like the Hate Jinx. This is the only instance of the Hate Jinx that I was actually happy with. The other ones all seemed like there's room and whatnot. This gave information to the Damsel, which is fun and interesting, as evidenced by Extension Cord, very popular no-dashy script with the Damsel and the Spy on there. So that's gone. It makes it less interesting, but meh, it is what it is. You can always bootleg it on those scripts. Summoner. Summoner's really good with a lot of mechanically confirming roles. Things like the Night Watchman, which I didn't even put on here. Might as well throw it on. Night Watchman. The King has an interesting interaction because the Summoner doesn't actually learn the King. Therefore, they could stay under wraps for a few days, which is fun. Things like the Innkeeper, the Poe, the Pucka, the Soldier, those are just because there's no death on night 2 with the Summoner. Could also throw on here Assassin. You could throw on here, I don't know, Godfather if they get lucky. Gossip, right? The bad ones on here are Pit Hag, Hatter. Should just throw Kazali on here while we're at it. Kazali, probably Lord of Typhon. The reason that those are not good is because with the Pit Hag, the Hatter, the Kazali, you're actually potentially before day 3 getting another evil player. Let's paint a picture. There is a demon in play. A Pit Hag turns a player into the Summoner, and the Summoner makes a new demon. They turn evil no matter what. There is a Jinx that kills them, but you just got an extra evil player. The Hatter allows the same thing the Pit Hag does. The Kazali allows the same thing the Pit Hag does, where you add a Hatter or the Summoner night 1, and then the Kazali does the same thing the Pit Hag does. Again, adding that Summoner gives you a free evil. I also don't think Summoner works very well with Alhad and Leviathan at the moment. I know Alhad just had an update where it can now sync and not kill on a night and pretend that it's not in play. at a given time. That still doesn't mean that Summoner and Owlhead is good. It's more playable on that script, but it doesn't mean it's good. All right, Vizier and Alchemist. That's a fun one. I like Vizier, I like Alchemist and Poppy Girl. I like all that together. I think it works, and I think those always make for fun scripts where you can be or pretend to be a good player that has a Vizier ability and just be outed with it and have fun with it. There was a recent change to the Alchemist that's going to make Vizier a little different. I'm not sure if it's more or less fun at the moment. I have not experienced the new Alchemist with that rule yet. The things that aren't so fun, and it mainly goes back to the same stuff you see on S&V with this Clockmaker, right? Clockmaker is not fun with an outed minion, and they are for sure outed. Politician, because of the voting. Politician is a good player that is incentivized to vote on everything with a Vizier in play. I know that there's a May part of their ability. I don't think that that's good enough for the terrible interaction there, so I would avoid that. And then the Magician. There is a new Jinx with the Magician, relatively new I should say, that came out several months ago. But the Magician, because of the fact that the Demon knows who the Vizier is, they have bluffs. The Magician also knows who the Vizier is, and they have no bluffs. The competition is skewed. The Witch, the last one here, the Alchemist, Harpy, Yaga, they all work with the Witch. I think the Witch is just fun in general. Alchemist Witch is quite entertaining as you try to snipe evil players, try to go for the demon and get them to nominate. And it also creates an atmosphere where the evil team is less likely to nominate if Alchemist and Witch are on the same script. This is a good one to keep under wraps and probably one of the strongest and more entertaining Alchemist roles in the game right now in all of Clocktower. But remember, when you're trying to balance the script, there's multiple complex interactions that are being created each time you make a change. Simplifying that with minions to these categories should help ensure some consistency to the balance of your scripts. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Tell me what pairings you think I got wrong and what I missed. I will leave a link to this Excel sheet in the comments for your personal use. Thank you.